Hello, this is Matt on the Moon Lambo channel. How do you feel about $22 XRP? Probably not too bad, right? Well, the XRP chart analysts that I choose to follow have been right about all of the most crucial price moves for XRP, with almost no exception. You know, they all saw the price burst coming last year. It ultimately occurred in November after the election, which was a logical point for that to occur. I talked about it in the weeks leading up to that. Also, they all believed that we would see not just a burst, but a new all-time high for XRP, which happened in January 2025. But that's not all. They also all believed that the January 2025 new all-time high of about $3.35 wouldn't be the last one. And indeed, we did get another one in July of this year at $3.65. Okay, but what about now? The market is in fear yet again. Everyone is screaming we're in a bubble. Everyone is screaming we're entering a bear market. Oh no. See, that's all you see on social media and in crypto news right now. Hop on social media, you're going to see a bunch of bear posts. That's going to be the vast majority of what you see right there. You know, in fact, the unpopular opinion now is to be a bull in this environment. So, does that mean the top is in for XRP because there's all this bearishness? Well, let me tell you this at the outset of the video. The chart analysts that I follow, pretty darn good track records on the whole, they all maintain their very large price predictions for XRP, and specifically for this market cycle. So, if you ask them, is XRP going to be seeing double-digit price action very, very soon? They're all going to say yes. But before going further, I do want to be clear, I do not have a financial background of any kind. I am not offering financial advice, and you definitely should not buy or sell anything because of anything I say or write. I'm just an enthusiast who enjoys making YouTube videos about crypto-related topics, but just as a hobby and just for fun. All right, the vast majority of what I'm going to cover in this video is going to be exclusively about XRP. In my very last video, and I thought it was the most prudent way to approach things in terms of content, was to talk about all the macro stuff that's been happening, why it does not make sense, in my humble opinion, to be a bear at this particular juncture in time. So if you want more of that type of stuff, and why I think that it makes sense to listen to these XRP chart analysts, even in a macro context, check out that video also. This video certainly stands alone on its own. If you just want to see, okay, do these analysts still stand by what they're saying about XRP? I mean, I'm telling you the answer is yes. I'm going to share with you exactly what they have to say. So that's almost 100% of the video, but there are a couple things I wanted to mention. One of them is something that I mentioned as just a stat in my last video. And after I recorded that video, I decided to share it because I just found it to be so fascinating. I decided to share it after recording that video on X. And so last night, I shared the following post. Going back to 1928, we've been in bull markets 78% of the time, and bear markets only 22% of the time. If you're hanging on the words of an analyst who preaches things are heading bearish more than 1/5 of the time, you're listening to a fool. Adjust accordingly. And folks, I do very much mean that. And, it doesn't mean that they're even stupid. I'm not even making that claim, just to be clear. This is my suspicion. I think that certain humans are wired in a certain way that, given the same data as the number of chart analysts who are perceived to be reputable and have good track records, there are some analysts that are going to look at the same set of information, and they're just more likely that, like, this individual human is more likely to come to conclusions that are bearish, because I can see it. Like, before I know some chart analysts, before I know, just because they're famous in crypto, not even all of them are famous, some of them just pop up in my feed a lot because they get shared, but before I even know the perspective of certain analysts, before I read them, I already know what they're going to say a lot of the time. Sometimes I get surprised, but a lot of the time I'm like, oh, well, this so-and-so happened, that's the person that says bearish stuff when things like that happen. You can just see it over and over again. And that's not useful. A small percentage of the time, it does make sense to be bearish. And when we get to that point, like I said in my last video, I'm going to be there saying, hey guys, warning signs, warning, red alert right here. We're seeing certain metrics trigger that historically mean that we've hit the peak or are nearing the peak of a crypto market cycle. I promise I'm going to share that with you because you don't want to be caught with your head in the sand. Of course, I want to be aware of that. I'm not a permabull, but I just don't believe that it makes sense to believe that the bull market's over, even if we have a pullback in the short term. As I noted in the last video, there are reputable analysts I follow with great hit rates who think there's at least somewhat of a chance that you could see a kind of a notable pullback in the stock market, and crypto would likely follow in the short term. But none of those people are also calling for, you know, the end to the crypto bull market or anything, or the stock market even here. So if you're listening to somebody who most of the time is just bearish year, like especially over the last few years, if you're listening to anyone over, like, say, the last few years who has mostly been bearish, think about that. Please think about that. It matters who you listen to. Get a broad range of perspectives, and it's okay for people to get stuff wrong. You know, every single great, talented analyst is going to get something wrong. It's more about the overall track record. And so I'm just telling you, if you're finding somebody who's consistently bearish, that's the wrong person to be hanging out with. And to drive the point home, take a look at this. This is an article from February of last year, but the age of it is completely irrelevant to the concept, which is still standing strong today. Here it's titled, Missing Bitcoin's Top 10 Days a Year Could Cost You All Annual Gains. Fun strat. And I want to be clear, even though this is about Bitcoin, the same concept is absolutely true for XRP. You have to be aware of this. And that's why if you're listening to these bear guys who are just consistently bearish, and then, you know, time passes and it just proves that they're so frequently wrong, if you're listening to them and maybe they're spooking you out of your positions, what's on your screen right now is why it's detrimental to you. They're infesting your mind and turning it bearish when the vast majority of the time data shows that you should be bullish. And so, yes, my post about 78% bull market, we're talking about, obviously it goes back to 1928. That's the stock market, right? But crypto has existed for over 16 years, so we got enough data now to know that it moves in tandem directionally with the stock market. That's why that matters. There's no indication it's going to change anytime soon. So what I'm about to read to you, absolutely relevant for the entire crypto asset class, including XRP. Reads as follows. Bitcoin is notoriously unpredictable, rendering market timing an arduous task. Different investment strategies exist, including dollar cost averaging and lump sum buying, each with unique merits. However, recent research from Fundstrat, shared by the CEO of Bitwise, Hunter Horsley, sketches a striking pattern. Missing the 10 best days of Bitcoin's returns each year essentially causes you to miss out on the entire year's profits. Did you hear that, folks? What that means is, if you're not invested in the market, in this case we're talking specifically about Bitcoin, fine. So if you're not invested for those 10 days out of the year, you have lost, your investment is down. If you miss 10 days out of 365 days, if you just miss 10 days, this is why I always go back to, like, are you a wizard? Do you know which of those 10 days it's going to be? Or how confident are you? Because if you miss one of them, or two of them, or three of them, well, that's a fuck ton of money you just lost. Why not be smart and do nothing? I have the most unsophisticated investment approach. It works in the stock market, has for 100 years. It works in crypto, has for 16 years that crypto's existed. It just works. You buy, and then you do nothing. And as a result of it being roughly that simple, I have no crypto course to sell you. I wish I had a crypto course to sell. I'd be like, there it is. That's I wish I could sell you that. $100 right there. Thank you. Cash or credit, you know, like, or XRP. I know you. No, I don't. I wouldn't. I would feel bad taking your XRP, even if you willingly give it. But no, like, I don't have anything to sell you. I literally have nothing to sell you. This is the truth that not enough people on YouTube are willing to tell you. I'm telling you, as someone that's been in crypto and held XRP for now almost 8 years. Next month it'll be 8 years for me, and having never sold a single XRP, I'm telling you, it freaking works. It just does. You just have exposure. And so check this out. This is how bad it gets. If you think that you start getting cute with your portfolio and you can time the market, you know best, right? You know better than everyone else. You're going to make this work. You're not going to miss those 10 days, right? Well, here's how bad it can be if you do. This pattern has remained consistent since 2013. During 2021, a bull market, the top 10 days of the year saw an astounding 179% return compared to negative 43% return during the other 355 days. So folks, not only do you miss gains, if you miss those 10 days, you're down for the year. Every single year, okay? Does this not perfectly illustrate the point that the price movements that matter, and this is true for XRP, they happen on almost 0% of days that exists? And so either you have exposure during that or you don't. Do you see why I always say either have exposure or you don't? You get to make that choice. then they write, in contrast, in a bear market year like 2019, the best 10 days still returned a substantial 217% against a negative 39% return for the rest of the year, according to Fundstrat. Astonishing figures. And so that's why I'd say, even if you think we're going into a bear market now, you don't know for sure. So are you sure it makes sense to panic sell? Are you sure you want to miss this? Well, I mean, you guys decide what's best for you. I'm just posing some thoughtful points of discussion, let's say, but let's talk about XRP the rest of the video, because I'll tell you, these guys that I'm following, they are not shaking despite what happened Friday. Obviously, I don't need to tell you at this point, massive liquidation event, the biggest in crypto history, about $20 billion. Some people are still thinking that number's going to be revised even higher. We'll see. Either way, it's already completely ridiculous. But I'm telling you, despite any news that's come out to spook the market since then, the XRP analysts that I follow, they insist this thing's going way higher. Here's a post from chart analyst Hubwaves. He says, XRP got the move down into our support level for the expanded flat we were following. And then he had a thread about that. For the sake of time, I'm not going to get into that level of specifics. Just hop on X if you want to see everything he had to say. And then he wrote, I said it'll happen pretty soon, but I didn't expect it to play like that. Nice 50+% bounce off our support level. Regardless of how things unfolded last week, the plan is still the same. $5.50-ish is our first target on the way to our macro target. And you can see he's targeting, I don't know that he thinks this is going to be the high for the cycle, but even here he's talking about like $8.50. So even if he has that, that would be one of the more conservative XRP price targets that I see from analysts. That's one of the most, actually, most conservative I see. It's actually hard to find a reputable chart analyst who would predict a price for XRP peaking that low. And maybe they're right, in which case, credit where it's due. I'm just saying it's hard to find that. And I've just noticed, having been here for a long time, you're going to find extremes on both sides. Low price predictions, high price predictions. Those extremes are almost never correct. It's usually somewhere in between. Here's a post from Crypto Insight UK. And he says, I've given you my case as to why I think XRP's next leg takes us out to $8 to $12. This is the area I've said I'll deleverage heavily. Isn't it funny looking at this recent liquidation event and throwing a fib on there to see where the price would take us to if we see a 4.236 extension now? Yes, it actually is. Now, keep in mind, he's got two different charts. The first one on your screen here is Coinbase. The next one I'll show you in a second, it's Binance. And if you're wondering why there's different price expectations based on these fib levels, it's because you do see different price action on different exchanges. At any given moment, you're not going to see literally the same price for XRP on any exchange. It's going to vary slightly. In times of high volatility, it can actually vary a lot, for short periods of time anyway. But that's because each individual exchange is its own contained ecosystem, and then people on one platform, they're probably paying attention to what's happening on other platforms. When I say platform, I just mean exchanges. So they're paying attention to what's happening on other exchanges, and then if there's too big of a gap, that creates arbitrage opportunities, and then that flattens out the price on a global scale. So in a general sense, in a nutshell, like that is what happens. But that's why, since you're going to see, especially looking at the liquidation event, that's why you're seeing these variances. So if you look at Coinbase, though, if you slap that fib down, that bad boy is at $9.78. Okay, so what about Binance? Binance slapped down the same fib and it goes at $13.15. So that's within the wheelhouse of what Crypto Insight UK has been talking about. And by the way, so I totally get what he's saying with deleveraging. He has made it very clear, though, that he thinks there's a very high probability that XRP actually peaks $20 to $30 this cycle, even though he didn't mention that in this post. He was just talking about for the next leg up. And there's historic precedent for this. The second major leg of the rally, the one that really gets things going, that one's way more impressive than the first one. The first one really happened in November. And you're still waiting for the second one. And historically, it hasn't taken this long for the second one. And you might think, well, wait a minute, is that concerning? I'm like, well, I mean, my honest answer is, if we had alt season and XRP still hadn't gone, and several months had passed after that, yeah, I'd be a little concerned. I'd be a little concerned at that point. But we haven't had alt season, and so it makes me wonder if the people like Raoul Pal and Julian Biddle and TechDev, if they're right in predicting that this market cycle is actually extending because of the business cycle. And it has to do with debt refinancing. And I've talked about this in other videos, so I won't go into it here. It's a minority opinion, but these are well-respected, thoughtful, data-driven individuals. So if they're correct, we'll look back. Everybody's gonna be like, "Oh yeah, of course. Look at this. See the data point." Well, they're telling you ahead of time. No, they've been saying it for I don't even know how long, half a year, maybe longer. They've been saying it for a long time, and they still believe that's going to be the case. They think that you're going to see a cycle top in 2026, even perhaps as late as Q2. So if that's the case, the fact that we're still waiting on that second major leg up for XRP, it's not that crazy. Yes, time-wise, it's longer. You could say that's different, but it would be different if XRP had already gone on its second rampage, that the business cycle didn't line up. So either way, something was going to be a little bit different, but the business cycle is, I think, the better indicator than just random time because of reasons. Like, the business cycle is way more crucial than just saying that. So you guys, tell your own perspective. That's what I think on it anyway. Here's a post from Credible Crypto. It says, the XRP chart remains one of the most bullish higher time frame charts, just meaning big picture when he says higher time frame, most bullish higher time frame charts in this entire space. And I look forward to seeing XRP at double digits by the end of this cycle. And I'll reiterate, folks, all these perspectives I'm sharing with you are after the liquidation event. All of them, when they're talking about XRP in this video. Higher, my friends. And he still firmly believes you're going to be seeing XRP at more likely to be $20 to $30. And he actually just published a video a few hours ago, and I checked it out. The XRP portion, I think it's like over an hour and a half, so I've not had time to watch the whole thing, and not every single coin he's charting is necessarily relevant to me, but I checked out the XRP part. If you want to hear more about why he believes what he believes, go check out Credible Crypto on YouTube. He does a great job articulating. I just don't want to regurgitate all that here, but suffice it to say, yeah, what happened with the liquidation on Friday did not break anything in the charts from his perspective. Then there was also, this is from chart analyst Bobby A. He was asked, have we given up on the XRP targets of $8 to $13? And just last night, Bobby A said, no, it just may take a little longer unless XRP can turn it around soon. So he's still got that optimism. And he has been talking about that upwards of $13 price target for XRP for this market cycle for a very long time. And he is one of the analysts I've been following consistently who absolutely has been right on every major move for XRP that matters this market cycle. Here's a post from chart analyst Mikey Bull Crypto. XRP, one of the most bullish charts right now. And you can see at this upper fib level, you're talking about targeting close to $22. And so it's hard for me to find perspective from analysts who don't suffer from XRP derangement syndrome that think this is going to break to the downside. Hell, it's even hard to find analysts who suffer from XRP derangement syndrome currently posting negative stuff because they're so afraid of getting egg on their face, because they have over the last year consistently. So now they've just kind of shut their stupid face holes up about XRP. But they'll be back. When the bear market comes back, they're going to start typing with their fat little sausage fingers about XRP on the internet. Oh, XRP down. That's what they sound. When I read their shit, that's kind of what they sound like in my head. I have high confidence that's what they sound like in person, though. Here's a post from Chart Nerd. XRP super trend confluence with $27. And so this kind of gets to what I was talking about a few minutes ago. How structurally, what's happening now, it looks like it's about to unfold exactly the same as 2017. It's just over a longer time period, again, having to do with debt refinancing. Raoul Paul, again, without going into too much detail, I've already covered this a lot recently. He thinks that the 4-year cycle is now shifted to 5 years based on debt refinancing shifting on average from 4 years to 5 years. And that's going to extend the business cycle as a result. And due to that, that's literally why we haven't seen the peak of the business cycle either, which is why this is dragging out longer. And it's not just XRP. So yes, XRP is dragging out longer. So that's the theory in a nutshell. But the whole market cycle, if they're right, it's dragging out further. It's not that we're about to enter a bear market, even if we dip in the short term. It's that it's a little bit longer, specifically because of the reasons I just cited, but then you still get this pop to the upside, which is why he's expecting this cycle to peak at $27. He did warn, though, and I'll mention this too, and I have seen posts like this from a few reputable chart analysts who are higher time frame bullish for XRP. Some of them have warned we could see a little bit lower first. Here's an example. This is also from Chart Nerd. He's warning that we could see XRP at $2.20, but he says after that, new all-time highs, so not exactly something to worry about. Here's a post from X-Force Global, and he says, XRP still bullish on the macro. XRP has chosen the flat route. We still have this as the final bullish option and is now within the confirmation stage. from a timing perspective, it's looking great. And you can see what he's targeting here is XRP landing for a peak this cycle somewhere between 20 to 30 bucks. So you guys decide what you think makes sense. I don't pretend to know for sure. I admit straight up, I don't know what's going to happen, but I have my leanings, I have my convictions just like any other human on the planet, and I just articulate why on my channel. But if you just look for history to kind of rhyme with itself, you're already directionally going the right way, because history, as I keep proving with data point after data point, data set after data set, over and over and over again, day after day, history really does tend to rhyme with itself, and it's not hard to understand why. When you put humans who have, if you get a large enough sample size, they have the tendencies they have in a certain type of situation. If you have another situation years later that's about the same or has many similar attributes, then humans with that same type of DNA overall within that sample size, you're going to get a pretty damn similar output. It's not hard to figure this out. So if you're going to bet against what usually happens, you will be wrong most of the time. Not all of the time, but absolutely most of the time you're going to be wrong. So I ain't playing that game. I think we go higher. I don't know for sure that we will, but by a lot, I believe it's just way, way more probable. It makes so much sense to be excited here, even if some of the analysts that I follow are correct in their thinking that you could see a little bit of pullback into the short term. I think the coming months are going to be very rewarding for those in crypto, including XRP. I'm not a financial advisor. You should not buy or sell anything because of anything I say or write. That would be a very, very, very bad idea. Until next time, to the moon, Lambo.